This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hey, I hear you think podcasts are all about true crime, huh? Well, wise guy, the iHeartRadio app's got all kinds of podcasts. We got stuff you should know and stuff they don't want you to know. We got Bobby Bones, Big Boy, and Lou Later. We got SpongeBob Binge Pants and Exotic Erotic Story Time. We got Doughboys, Two Dudes in a Kitchen, Green Eggs and Dan. Hey, we got Elf Quest. We got podcasts for everything on the iHeartRadio app for free. If you don't download that, well, that's not just a true crime, my friend. That's criminal.
The hunt to find the best drinks producer in the Food and Farming Awards this year has taken me to some remarkable places with delicious results.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That is really lovely. Oh, so that's super luscious. Very crisp. It reminds me of a cross between yogurt and cottage cheese. Cheers. Cheers.
On the shortlist, drinks makers both big and small, all delighted to be in the running.
Absolutely over the moon and a little shocked, to be honest.
This has just felt like a really nice present.
It came out of the blue, so we were very shocked and surprised.
I'm Jaega Wise, and I've been sampling some of the finest liquids in the land and uncovering some surprising stories on my travels.
We got the first new licence in Belfast in over 30 years, so I think that's why it's been so popular. Is it's something new. It's very rare for a new venue to open just because of our licensing system in Northern Ireland.
What's the most expensive bottle of whiskey you've ever sold?
Personally, it's £400,000. And it was a Japanese whiskey.
Was it really? There's a cow in the car. Sorry to interrupt.
What do they say? Don't work with animals and don't work with children.
I know.
Each drinks producer was selected from hundreds of entries that we received after we launched the awards, both here on BBC Radio and on the TV show Saturday Kitchen on BBC One.
Jaega, the finalists for this category of this year's Food and Farming Awards for the Best Drinks Producer have been announced.
They have, and I've got the final 3 with us. So we're all going to have a little taste-off to see what we think should be crowned Britain's best drink.
3 very different drinks as well.
3 very different
Tough
drinks.
gig.
It was a tough gig, sifting through hundreds of entries to come up with our final 3. And to mull over our choices, I met up with Saturday Kitchen's drink specialist, Ollie Smith, in the Durham, a trendy whiskey bar in central London.
Hey!
Hi, Ollie.
How you doing?
Good to see you.
So good to see you as well. What a place this is.
I know. Come sit, let's talk drinks.
You bet.
What did you think when you saw our final 3?
I was knocked out by how extraordinarily different they were. To judge the level of quality in those drinks across the board must have been an extraordinary task. But I found with each of them, they had exceptional character. I was thrilled. And I think they're somehow all of the moment as well. We've got a craft beer, the Ki-Kefir, and then the whiskey. All of them deserving their place, no question, in the final. But all of them are quite challenging in their own way as well. They're not straightforward drinks. So I was completely blown away, to be honest with you.
And just the sheer number of nominations we had this year was quite something. I mean, the Saturday Kitchen audience, yeah. I mean, it gets the BBC Food Awards really out there.
I think that's exactly it. And I'm always surprised, actually, by how many people are prepared to go the extra mile and taste something completely out of their comfort zone. I think that's what really craft drinks production is all about. And we've got such a heritage in this country. For us to have such a local spread and for everybody to be getting behind it as they have is marvellous.
Our first shortlisted drinks producer is the Bull House Brewery from Belfast. I love their beers, as you'll soon hear, and Ollie did too.
Well, I thought the beer just spoke volumes about character. I thought the texture of it was unbelievable. Like, talk about pillowy. I mean, it was duvet. It was just so fluffy and delightful. And the flavour, just so engaging. You know, it's such almost like a sort of ray of light straight to the sort of heart of your being. It's that kind of immediacy. I remember Rick Stein once saying the first time he ever tasted Thai food, it reminded him of the first time he'd heard Led Zeppelin. I'd always kind of wondered about that. I know what he meant now. When I tasted that beer, I thought, this is fresh, this is beautiful, and there's something truly magical in it.
But to understand the journey that Bull House has been on, you need to be across the alcohol licensing laws in Northern Ireland and the controversial issue of something called the surrender principle. Some say it's too restrictive and means pub licences now change hands for upwards of £100,000. Others believe it helps to keep standards high.
Surrender principle is actually very simple in that to open a new pub, bar, nightclub category licence, you have to basically hand in an old licence. So if you're going for a new licence, you have to hand one back. It was created years ago when our pubs and nightclubs were increasing exponentially, and it was a method to slow that down.
That's Colin Neal from the trade body Hospitality Ulster, who's been supportive of keeping the current system. More from him later. First, to Belfast. I've just arrived at Bull House Brewery, one of the finalists in this year's BBC Food and Farming Awards. Craft beer hasn't developed in Northern Ireland in the way that it has in other parts of the UK. So I'm here today to understand some of the reasons why.
My name is William Main. I'm the founder of Bull House Brewing Company. I grew up on a farm, so I had a 500 square foot shed, which used to be a bull pen, which is where the name comes from.
Bull House.
So, so basically spent in 2015, started speaking to some of the other local breweries that had started. We had a bit of a resurgence in 2011, 2012 of some new breweries coming onto the scene, mainly hobbyists who were doing it in garages and sheds and stuff. And then started selling the beer. Then I was driving around a Clio, so it was just out the back of the Clio, delivering to local independent off sales and bottling everything by hand. So basically, I bought some old kit from another brewery that was expanding. So the mash tun was an old steel fridge that had been converted in with a false bottom on it. So it was the brew kit the brew house cost 1,500 quid. Just started 500 litre batches. In 2017 then I ended up leaving the full-time job and went full-time with the brewery. So it was just me. And then gradually we've expanded, and then in 2020 we moved here to this site, which is 6,000 square foot.
Wow, so it's a big site.
Yeah, it is big. So we've expanded. We're now doing about 6,000 litres a week. But yeah, so we package everything into about 70% into keg and about 30% into cans. And most of the kegs actually end up over in GB, because outside our own tap room in Belfast, only 5% of the rest of our volume goes to Northern Ireland. That's how small the local market is. So 30% goes to our own tap room, and then 5% goes to the rest of Northern Ireland combined. So we've got more taps in Manchester and London than we do in Belfast.
Should we go taste some beer?
Yes.
What have we got here?
So I think we've got a selection of probably 6 or 7 of our range. We normally have about 12 beers in stock at any one time. We've got 4 core beers. So this is 4% easy drinking pale ale, dry hopped with Citra.
Oh, so that's super luscious. Very crisp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Citrusy tropical fruit flavours on there.
We get through a lot of Citra. It's one of our favourite hops, I guess. A lot of breweries are probably similar. But yes, we feel, you get that citrusy tropical fruit burst, which is hard to beat.
So Citra is the big American hop. I'd probably call it the queen of all dry hops. So big fruity citrus notes on there. Very, very popular with craft breweries in the UK. You have a very busy, popular bar in town. Yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Bull House East, it's called, is our, satellite tap room, we call it. And we got the first new licence in Belfast in over 30 years. So I think that's why it's been so popular, is it's something new. It's very rare for a new venue to open, just because of our licensing system in Northern Ireland. So we've got a really fairly densely populated area that has traditionally been underserved in terms of bars and pubs. Back whenever the Titanic was being built, and 100 plus years ago, there were loads of bars in that area, but there used to be, I think, something like 20 pubs in the 1 mile stretch from the city centre to where Bull House East is. and there's now only 3 pubs left. So there's a huge population that has just been underserved. So we've sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of opening a neutral, family-friendly, sort of inclusive space for people to come to. So it's busy. We're open 7 days a week, and it's busy most nights.
You mentioned that it's the first new license to be issued in 30 years. I understand the licensing laws in Northern Ireland work very differently to GB. Could you explain how it works?
Yeah, well, it actually dates back to 1902, so it's over 100 years old. And back at that stage, on the island of Ireland, this predates partition, so Ireland was all part of the UK at that stage. And there was 1 pub for every 250 people. So there was a huge amount of surplus pubs, and that's a result of, from the 1860s and mass exodus of people during the famine. So the population went from 8 million people to 4 million people. And all these pubs had stayed and had kept going. So basically, at that stage, there was a rise in Puritanism and the temperance movement, and that obviously resulted in Prohibition in the US. And pubs at that stage decided to agree to a cap on the amount of licenses. And then post-partition, 1921, that stayed in place, north and south. So it's the same in the Republic of Ireland as it is in Northern Ireland, although it's slightly over time it's become slightly more lax in the Republic of Ireland. So the amount of pubs has dwindled ever since, because essentially if a pub ceases trading, they lose the license. So there were, even in 1970, there were 2,900 pubs, and there's now only 1,100 pubs left in Northern Ireland. So we've gone from having 1 pub for every 250 people to the lowest amount of pubs per capita out of any region in the UK. Just because every time a supermarket opens and they want to sell off sales, they have to buy a license. So normally this means that a community will lose their pub somewhere, because the pub license and the supermarket license is the same thing. So the supermarkets will buy a pub, close the pub down, and then transfer the license to their supermarket. So if you want to get a new license, you have to surrender an existing license. So that puts an inherent value on the license. So the value at the minute is about £100,000 just for the license. But the real challenge is then moving a license from one area to a different area. You have to be able to prove to the court that there's a need and a requirement in the area that you want to move it into. And any pub in the area that you're wanting to move it into can object on the grounds of competition. Even Brewdog, with all their financial might, and Wetherspoons and stuff, have struggled to get licenses in Northern Ireland just because of how difficult it is to obtain a license in the city.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that as a brewer?
It's terrible for the local beer industry because it means there's so few pubs for us to sell into. There's 4 multinational operators, breweries operating in Northern Ireland, who are all competing for 1,100 draft accounts. So there's huge amounts of money involved in terms of tying pubs to supply agreements. So it basically cuts off the market to the local breweries, which is why we only sell 5% of our beer in Northern Ireland outside our own venue. And that's why the industry is such a cottage industry, because you have to export. You can't sell on your doorstep.
What would be the opposing view? I mean, Hospitality Ulster would say it keeps the chains out of Northern Ireland, it keeps pubs independent, it keeps pubs busy. That's why you wouldn't issue more licenses. I mean, surely that's a good thing, right? I
think from the independent point of view, there's an argument there that it does keep chains out of Northern Ireland, but it also, I don't think there's any detrimental. I think it's good to have competition, it's healthy to have competition, and I think the local pubs can compete well against those chain pubs. I think people in Northern Ireland are very proud to support local. People go out to their restaurants and buy local meat and local produce, and the quality of produce is very good. The quality of pubs is very good here, so I don't think there would be a huge challenge in terms of competing against those chain pubs from GB. I think from a consumer point of view, the price of a pint in Belfast is now the highest in the UK. So the average price of a pint of lager is £6.10, which is higher than London. We're now higher than Dublin as well. So for consumers and for tourists coming to Belfast and spending money, people want choice, and people want small independent venues. And there's no we have independent venues that are owned by a handful of publicans, but we don't have any small new entrants to the market. I think that means the market's quite stagnant.
I took Will Main's concerns to Colin Neal, Chief Executive of Hospitality Ulster. His organisation, where Will is also a member, takes a different view on the surrender principle.
The general view, I would say, from the industry is, look, the current licensing system is working and serving us well from a good product point of view. It is an open market because it is independence, where if we were, it's a bit like if you went to a big chain in England and they've 900 pubs, do a deal with them and you tie up those 900 pubs. One of the challenges, I suppose, for the small brewer here is we have something like roughly 1,150 pubs. So if you want to sell your product in there, it's 1,150 people you've got to get in front of and sell it to.
I run a pub in East London, and just the general cost to open a pub, and it was already an existing pub, we had to put a kitchen in, etc. Just the cost of opening a pub, the thought of another 6 figures in terms of licensing, for me, would be just unaffordable. It would just mean I would not be able to partake in the pub scene in Northern Ireland.
I would argue, actually, what we do have as a result is people who invest far more in their premises, because the whole thing has that intrinsic value. When I go into an English pub, they're lovely, but they're nowhere near the quality of fit out or experience that an Irish Ulster pub will deliver, because we have that independents who are investing heavily in their premises continuously.
So an argument that says if you relaxed or changed the surrender principle, which would lead to more competition, which would lead to lower prices in terms of pints for the consumer, I mean, what would you say to that?
It doesn't stack up when you do the sums. You wouldn't get more competition because the market's not there for it. The pub numbers right across the UK and indeed all of Ireland are on the decline. So it's not stopping growth. And I say there's plenty to rent. I think it's a false sort of thing to think just because you could get more licence, there'd be a bigger market. Unfortunately, it's not.
What about craft beer? What about craft beer in Northern Ireland? It is lacking in terms of the range of brewers compared to other parts of GB. And I would say, especially for a capital city, there are fewer independents based in Northern Ireland.
Well, I mean, as in craft brewers, we actually have quite a few craft brewers right across the province. As a share of the market, it's smaller, but that's down to taste profile. We are, if you take it, over a third of every draft pint sold in the island of Ireland is Guinness. We are a huge Guinness nation. And after that, we are a lager nation. Our taste profile, we don't drink ales. We historically never have. So there's a very limited market. And when craft comes into that space, they're competing against big taste profile brands, as the world does nowadays.
Do you have an idea what it is about the Northern Irish consumer that means that, in your opinion, that they're less into craft beer? Because we've seen this huge boom of craft beer all over the world.
I think it's an historical taste profile. And look, we've all seen too, the craft beer market plummet a bit now. You've seen America, you can buy a huge craft brewer now for £1. You've taken on their debts. So things peak. Maybe we're slow to peak because of that. But I do think, look, if the consumer wants it, it will get bought.
Colin Neal from Hospitality Ulster, giving us another perspective. The government in Northern Ireland has commissioned an independent review into the alcohol licensing system by the University of Stirling, and we expect it to report back very soon. Now, where were we? Yes, back to that whiskey bar with Ollie Smith. Oh, and our drinks are here.
Oh, great. What have we got?
So we have a house-made stone fruit Americana. Lovely. Along with a aloe vera and Mastilla highball.
Excellent. And I love a fancy block of ice.
Yes.
They look good.
Very long, that piece of ice.
It's very long.
It's beautiful.
Do you want the pink one?
I'd love the pink one.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass you the aloe vera. Hang on, there we go.
I love the aloe vera.
You can have the aloe vera.
Okay, lovely. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, mine's really good as well, actually. Cheers.
Cheers, Ollie. Thank you for joining me on this.
I'm literally at my happy place. This is great. This is the best day ever. Forget Christmas. This is awesome.
Next, I went to Ki-Kefir, who were not far from Lewis, actually, so not far from your neck of the woods. And I met with Sam and tasted her kefir, which was absolutely gorgeous. She calls it the
champagne of dairy.
Oh, I do love that. I get it though, because it does have a very kind of buzzing sort of character about it. It's a little effervescence, absolutely. That tiny, delicate prickle. In champagne bubbles or in sparkling English wine bubbles, you want the tinier the bubbles, basically the better the quality, the more they caress. So I'm with her. I think that's a brilliant analogy.
The process is incredibly simple. It's essentially add kefir grains to milk, ferment, strain, bottle. Very straightforward.
Very straightforward, very ancient as well. I was reading in a paper the other day about finding kefir on mummified remains and, venerated. This was like 3,600 years ago, I think, in China. And an extraordinary kind of way of thinking about how important this stuff is, a way of surviving. It's an ancient craft, but it's one that feels very present tense, very important now. We're very much talking about the health of our gut biome, and these are really important conversations to have. And that's, I think, why I was so delighted to see it in the finals, and also because it's a challenging flavour profile. It's not for everybody, and I salute that, because I think everybody should try it. If you don't like it, it's fine, but I absolutely loved it. It felt raw, felt full of vitality, and it felt surprising, and that's what competitions like this should be all about.
Oh, hello. Hello. Hello, nice to meet you. There you go.
I can go in that way, you can come in this way, whichever way you want.
So we've come just about 20 minutes outside Lewes onto a farm. We have come into a corner of that farm. Nestled away is a little kitchen. Now, it's a kitchen that has been expanded quite somewhat, and there are glass jars everywhere, all filled with what looks like a milk product.
I'm Sam Murphy, and I run Ki-Kefir. So I started about 5 years ago, and it was very small, humble setup. I did it in my home kitchen. I lived in Vauxhall in London at the time, and I used to buy kefir, and often I would be like, it tastes a bit like yogurt, and then I'd make my own, and I was like, there's a massive difference. What's the difference? So I started making it for just family, friends, a few people, and my business partner Damien works in the fitness industry. He would give it out to a few different people, and people bought it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is onto something.
For those people who don't know what a kefir is, could you explain?
Yeah, of course. So it is a fermented milk, cultured milk, and you have basically two ingredients. You've got milk, and then you have living cultures, and you put them together. The cultures are little colonies of bacteria and yeasts, and they ferment the milk. They eat up the sugars in the milk, which is the lactose, and as the fermentation process happens, it then sort of, populates what was milk. It changes it, transforms it into kefir, and then it's populated with lots of bacteria. So the lactose is transformed into lactic acid. You've got numerous other bacteria within that. And it's actually a completely different finished product to what it was initially when you started with it as milk. So the lactose is pretty much non-existent because it's all eaten up. The casein, which is the protein, is broken down through fermentation. The texture of it changes, the taste of it completely changes, and traditionally it was used as a means of preservation. So before we had refrigeration, people used to ferment kefir and lots of other things to keep a product without being in a fridge. And we've got lots of customers that have got families in Eastern Europe and things, and whenever they drink our kefir, they go, oh my God, it reminds me of my grandma. And I've heard it so many times because they genuinely would just have it growing up. And actually loads of cultures have it within their diet, but they might call it something else. I met a lady from Africa the other day, and she was like, we've got something really similar in Zimbabwe. It's not called kefir, we call it this. Yeah, I've heard that quite a few times further afield out of Europe as well. So
I want to know how you make yours.
We basically started with a very small batch. When I started, a very small batch of grains, about a tablespoon, and we've never had to buy them since because the grains just continue to grow, so they multiply.
And those grains are what contain your bacteria, your yeast. So talk me through what's happened here. So you've got some milk, and where's the milk coming from?
So we source our milk from a farm down the road called Hook & Sons. They are organic, they're fully grass-fed, which was really important for me. I just wanted to find grass-fed milk. So we use their milk. We've got the grains in here. We put those in yesterday, and then we set the temperature, leave them to ferment. We stir them a couple of times throughout the process.
What temperature you say?
So we've set, and normally I would say between 18 to 22. It depends on how warm it is here as well, because that will then impact it. And it's about a 24-hour fermentation process.
It's quick.
And it continues to ferment. So even once you've bottled it, we sieve it and everything, but it's still fermenting away in the bottle.
Okay, so you crash cool it, then what happens next?
Yeah, I'm just going to pour it in here.
Smells like a yogurty, cheesy.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So yeah, at least you can have it cold because it's chilled. So then, as I'm sieving it now, you can start to see the separation. The kefir is obviously coming through the bottom of the sieve. And then you can start to see all the grains that we've got in here, just at the top, which are the good little guys.
And then what do you do with this? You use this for another kefir?
Yeah, we would just start another batch then the next day. Thanks, my love. We would just start another batch.
Do you have any idea of the microbiological makeup of your kefir grains?
No, I've really tried to find out, and I've been to like numerous different labs. So they say with this sort of process that you can get anywhere between 30 and 65 different strains of bacteria and yeasts. I would love to know. I will just bottle them. So yeah, and then this is the finished product. So obviously you can see that the texture of it has changed. It's not thin like milk, it's got a bit of a thicker texture.
So it's a very simple process.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. Yeah. So how many of these are you doing a week?
So the capacity right now is 100 litres a day, over 13 jars. It's been hard, I guess, because of the nature of the product. When you're delivering it, it has to stay cold because the fermentation will continue. Saying that, we've got loads of customers who will like leave it out of the fridge. So they prefer it like as funky as possible. They want it fizzing, they want it in. It's known to be like the champagne of dairy. And
like
people,
that, the champagne of dairy.
Yeah. And like it's a known thing. Like if you research it, it comes up. But people are like, oh, just leave it out of the fridge for a day. I just really like it with the fizz.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So interesting. It's incredibly soft. But in the background, there's all sorts of acids darting around. It reminds me of a cross between yogurt and cottage cheese. But you could drink a lot of this. You could have it in the morning, you could have it with breakfast.
My sister drinks it before bed. We grew up kind of having a glass of milk before we went to bed. That's her like new equivalent of doing that, I guess. And she was like, I just feel like it's like working wonders when I'm asleep. It's like doing loads of good stuff in my body.
So I want to understand from you what your hopes are for the business. What's next?
I would love to get Ki-Kefir in many more fridges around the UK. I'd love for people to understand what a real traditional kefir is, for them to want to consume that and get like a lot of people get creative with it in their kitchen, and to just see it wider spread around the UK.
What can you claim on the label in terms of good health?
It's high in protein because it's milk. I think it contains a source of calcium. I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you suspect, in terms of health,
that it helps to populate your gut with good bacteria, which then in turn helps with numerous things such as mental health, skin health, mainly digestion. So a lot of people that struggle with IBS. Also things like it's a source of magnesium, calcium, B12, biotin, because all those things are contained within a good milk, good dairy.
But you can't see any of that on your website or the label.
No.
That must be quite frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it, and I don't know whether or not I will ever get into trouble for doing that. But I'm not afraid to sort of say that on like social media. A lot of customers that don't have social media, so it's kind of up to them to really do the research.
And that was Ki-Kefir in East Sussex. And there is this trend towards certain drinks being potentially good for you. So kefir being one of them, kombucha being another one. There's this trend, and I spoke to Sam and asked her about how much camaraderie is there between those industries, because they all have quite similar issues. And she said very little. which is quite surprising.
I'm surprised, yeah. I think in the non-alcoholic drinks world, there's quite a lot of cooperation, and more in the wine world as well, I'd say. How is it in craft beer? There are a lot of people collegiately
we're talking to each other, we're drinking together, we're brewing together.
This is great.
I love a collab.
This is what I love about that, because I genuinely think that is the standard bearer for everybody else, you know. And I look at the drinks industry, I think the more ideas we cross-pollinate with each other, the more we hang out with each other, the more we find out who we are, the more interesting the drinks or the produce or the food or whatever it is we're going to create together. And we are all ultimately here for each other. We don't do anything in isolation in this life. And it's the most beautiful thing to find out more and to be surprised and engage and stay curious.
Mate, I'm loving this cocktail.
Has it got booze in it?
It does have booze in it.
I was wondering about mine. Mine was so tasty. I thought, hang on, this has got booze in it.
Of course it does.
I know.
What do you think I ordered?
Well, I'm delighted by that. Don't get me wrong, but it's just...
Now, my final visit was to the Glenturret Distillery. It was about an hour away from Edinburgh in a place called Crieff. And to say it was incredible is an understatement. I've never been to a place like it.
Really?
It's one of the oldest... No, it is the oldest working distillery in Scotland.
Amazing.
Opened in 1763. And everything about the place exudes age and exudes
like a sense of heritage, or
heritage is the exact word. And the distillers, when you talk to them, they don't talk about making whiskey for tomorrow, next year, 5 years. They talk about making whiskey for the next generation. They talk about how they will never taste the whiskey they make. They're doing it for the next generation. And if you go into their barrels and you go into their stores, there are barrels there that are 50, 60, 70 years old. I've never been to anywhere with such age and such heritage. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, custodians of something that is so fluid and is evolving through time. And as you say, they won't necessarily taste the end results, but they will taste those things which are left by the people who came before. Something very beautiful about that. I think intergenerational production of anything is just gorgeous, because we are going to leave this planet to the people who come after us. And if you're doing something in a sort of a great chain and you're thinking about exactly that and trying to sort of say something about your time, but also protect something for the future, give something to the people who are yet to come, fantastic. And I thought the whiskey was knockout. I mean, Rick Stein, he couldn't get it out of his hand on Saturday Kitchen. He absolutely loved it. And we all did. We all loved all three, but there was just an impact to this. It was like tasting a sort of sultana bathing in a jacuzzi of brandy snaps. It was just so sort of lavish and delicious. And it took me on a journey as soon as I tasted it.
Hi there. How's it going? Enjoying your plates?
Just where the tour starts.
Yes, exactly that, yeah. So hi there, I'm Ian Renwick. I'm the distillery manager here at Glenturret Distillery. So I've been here for 28 years, and the previous 10 years before that I actually worked for an engineering company and did a lot of the engineering out here as well. So I've really been here since the mid-80s is really when I started my love of Glenturret.
Wow, so you've been here a long time?
I have a little bit, yeah, but I mean our history goes back to 1763, so if you take that in context, I've actually not been here that long.
And you hold the title of being the oldest working distillery in Scotland,
We do, yeah. We've got documents going back to 1763 right through. We did close down for a period. So at the Prohibition time, sort of late 1920s, Glenturret, like many distilleries in Scotland, did actually close down for a period.
Wow. Okay, show me around.
Once we've got the malted barley in, what we'll do is we have to grind it, because obviously it's coming in a full form. So we'll put it through our mill, we'll take it down into husk, grits and flour, just at the right ratios we're looking for. Then we'll take it next door into the mash house and we'll extract the sugars. We're standing in front of a very shiny, spanking looking mash tun, which looks very modern for sure. Over here, yeah. There we go, beautiful sound. I love the fact, I've been here for a long time, but we just released a whisky last year that was actually made in 1972. We're making whisky today, I'm not going to see probably 90% of it bottled. You know, I'm going to be retired long before that's happened, so I'll look back fondly and just to see what's happening. So what we're doing is we're just putting steam onto tank 2 here, so we're going to heat this up for our second water. So we do 3 waters, 3 extractions through our malted barley. So the idea is we're trying to extract all the enzymes, and the sugar as well. The enzymes are obviously going to help us through the fermentation process, and the sugar is going to be turned into alcohol at the end of the day.
Wow, look at here.
So what you can hear there is actually the fermentation happening. So we've taken our sugars from next door, we've added the yeast, and now that's working away to make an alcohol. Beautiful sound, isn't it?
It smells so beautiful in here. We're in a very large warehouse where there are just rows upon rows of barrels. And this isn't the only warehouse. There's, how many? There's 6. It's almost overwhelming. And it smells just absolutely fantastic in here. It smells gorgeous. How many barrels do you think you have in your stock?
I don't think I know.
Well, you know, good answer. Go on.
Yeah, we've got just over 5,500 on site. Wow. Obviously, it's very tightly regulated by us. It looks a little bit chaotic in here, but it's not at all. You know, look at. It
actually doesn't look chaotic.
Does it not?
It looks very neat and orderly. Actually,
I always think it looked a little bit untidy, but there we go.
How do you feel about people buying your whiskey to keep for it to increase in value versus drinking it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, coming from a distillery manager, I would always prefer people drank it. So we realise that people do that, and quite often with some of their older whiskies, we'll actually have the whiskey and we'll have a miniature as well. So what we've got here, actually, we've got spirit from 1987. So if you want to have a little nose of this and see what you think. What we're doing is we've just opened the cask, so we're smelling this straight from the cask.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That is really lovely. Very fruity.
Yeah, I think some of our whiskey from 1987, I think it smells almost tropical.
Yeah.
You're getting a pineapple note coming through there, aren't you?
I was going to say almost, but like candied pineapple.
Yeah, it's actually very sweet. Yeah.
How would you describe this room?
This is a tasting room, so once you finish the tour, you can come round here, and depending on what we're giving to the customers at the moment, we can set it up any way you want, but it's beautiful, isn't it?
It's very grand, lots of wooden panelled walls, marble.
Yes,
very
it is
expensive
marble.
looking room.
Crystal chandeliers.
Yep.
This for us is like, so for the sort of tourism team and the presenting team, this is the stage basically. So just finished being in the distillery, you come in here, you present them with the whiskey. Yeah, so I'm Alex Thompson, I'm the visitor attraction manager here at Glenturret Distillery.
Should we taste them? Great.
We should, yeah. There's a really nice noise here. My favourite noise in the world.
So what should I expect over a whiskey that's been in barrel for as long as 15 years, versus a whiskey that's been in barrel for the legal requirement of 3 years?
Yeah, so
what's some of the difference?
We talk about, with whiskey, we talk about flavour profiles, right? So you can talk about a distillery character versus a cask character. So distillery character is what the actual spirit tastes like. So for Glenturret, as Ian mentioned, you're looking for those nice citrus notes, toffee, apple, all these kind of things. Whereas the cask character, for most of the casks that we're using for our whiskey, is a fruitiness. Now, for the ones that are in the 15, it's primarily dried fruits, spices, dark chocolate is the cask character.
Raisin is just jumping out.
Straight away, right? For the 15, loads of Christmas cake in there, loads of dried fruits, loads of spice. I get a bit of dark chocolate in there, and the amazing thing about the 15 is it's totally unpeated, but a lot of people pick up on a smokiness.
There is a hint, there is a hint, but it's lots and lots of fruit character.
Yeah. Now that's
a bit heavier than 12 years.
Oh, definitely.
The 12 years are gentler.
Yeah.
But this is really stunning, but it's all about the dancing dark fruits, for sure. What about this battle between heritage versus modernity? I mean, do you see that as a fight, or are you clinging to the old or looking to the future?
I wouldn't say we are clinging to the old. I would say the biggest change we've made at Glenturret, really in the last 100 or so years, was changing the mash tun, and that was looking at, okay, this is a way that traditionally it has been done, but actually there's a way that we could do it in a more efficient way and be much more sustainable. So where we can keep tradition, we always will. But if that traditional practice is not sustainable, then absolutely. We've no sentimentality about that, I would say.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, when we did to make the changes to production, we spent 2 years looking at what we actually have at the moment and trying to mimic that, but making it much, much more sustainable. During that process, I like to think we've managed to keep our new make spirit, but we've also knocked 1 million litres of water out of our process. So 1 million litres, if you take that into context, that's obviously we've not used it. It doesn't go through the system, so we're not heating it up, we're not pumping it, we're not trying to distill it off. So there's loads of different savings there. So we talk about how much energy we've saved over the last 5 years. It's almost halved already, and that's just the first start, just the start of the process. This is the fun bit of the job, actually, about how we're going to do it, how we're going to move into the future to make sure we are here in 50 years, 100 years time.
Thank you so much for taking me through some of your flavours. They really all taste very, very beautiful. So the most expensive bottle of whiskey that has been sold at Glenturret was £80,000. Wow. Now, Ollie, you're a man of the world.
Oh, yes.
What's the most expensive drink you've tried?
It's probably Domaine de la Romanie Conti, which is the most famous Pinot Noir in the world from Burgundy, and does cost a lot of money. I mean, thousands of pounds. I haven't bought it, but I've been very lucky enough to visit the winery, and a great privilege. Remarkable quality, no doubt. I always think, though, the most precious drink I ever tasted was when I was in Hungary, and I was in a vineyard producing Tokai, which is a sweet wine. And before it had even been made, the semi-desiccated grapes were just sitting there dripping juice gently, had a little thimbleful in the vineyard, and it was something that money couldn't buy, but it was a moment I'll treasure for the rest of my life, something free of the place and yet totally memorable.
And that's the fantastic thing about drinks, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. They connect me directly with the places and the people I've visited, and with the people and places I haven't yet been. So I love it. It's like a spirit level for being a human being. It's the best thing in the world.
Ollie, thank you so much for chatting to me about the finalists. It's always great to hear your thoughts and opinions. Just what a great final three we've got. But there is a thread between them all, I think.
I think the ancient thing, isn't it? It's the kefir being something that stretches so back, preserving milk, to actually survive. Beer. I went to a tomb in Egypt when I was filming a show called How Beer Changed the World, and we saw ancient hieroglyphs of beer being brewed and given to people, again, for survival because they couldn't drink the water, but stretching back thousands of years. What a great heritage that is, as you well know. But and the whiskey, that just feels as well. The distillation, that coming out of, was it Mesopotamia, and stretching around the Islamic world for perfume initially, and then finally being used for alcohol. They all stretch back, and yet they're all so right now. It's brilliant, Jaega.
They are ancient yet rooted in modernity at the same time.
I'll drink to that. I do love this. It's when worlds collide, isn't it? 3 incredibly different producers. One extraordinarily opulent and lavish with great heritage. One that, is doing great things in Belfast. It sounds pioneering to me. It feels pioneering. And then one very much of the landscape in Sussex. They couldn't be more contrasting. I absolutely salute you and the judges. You've come up with 3 radically different drinks, but all of them standing for something, and all of them are worthy winners.
And you're going to come and you're going to find out who the winner is at our ceremony in December.
I will be there, and I cannot wait to celebrate. Fantastic.
$1-800-Flowers.com knows that a gift is never just a gift. A gift is an expression of everything you feel and helps to build more meaningful relationships. 1-800-Flowers takes the pressure off by helping you navigate life's important moments by making it simple to find the perfect gift. From flowers and cookies to cake and chocolate, 1-800-Flowers helps guide you in finding the right gift to say how you feel. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Hey, I hear you think podcasts are all about true crime, huh? Well, wise guy, the iHeart Radio app's got all kinds of podcasts. We got stuff you should know and stuff they don't want you to know. We got Bobby Bones, Big Boy, and Lou Later. We got SpongeBob Binge Pants and Exotic Erotic Story Time. We got Doughboys, Two Dudes in a Kitchen, Green Eggs and Dan. Hey, we got Elf Quest. We got podcasts for everything on the iHeart Radio app for free. If you don't download that, well, that's not just a true crime, my friend. That's criminal.